Company of Prophets by Joyce Elaine Noll. Read by Ausid O'Neill. Produced by Company of Prophets. Chapter 1, Children of Power, continued.
The older girl playfully whirled her sister by the heels, but when they closed in on a tree, their fun came to an abrupt end. Betty's head hit the tree solidly and cracked open. This severe wound, like all of the illnesses and mishaps of the family of 8 children, was treated by their mother, using the ways of natural healing she learned from her mother out of their Caribbean past. After recovering from the injury, 7-year-old Betty was astonished to find unprecedented and sudden attention given to her by other children. This confused her, and she remembers thinking to herself, "I'm just a child. Why are they coming to me as if I were their mothers?" Children at school and in her Newark, New Jersey neighborhood were asking her questions and seeking solutions to problems in their lives. With ease, she marveled. She could answer them. A young woman came into the hospital where 16-year-old Betty worked as a tray server. Following a psychic impression, Betty asked the woman if she had 4 children. She answered, "Yes, but what business is it of yours?" I told her, "I don't know, but don't go outside the way you came in, because someone is waiting for you." Together, they went to the exit to check out Betty's premonition. Peering outside, they saw a man crouching in the bushes with a switchblade knife. The woman thanked Betty for saving her life and left the hospital by another exit. A native of New Jersey, Betty Combs, an evangelist and psychic counselor, has lived in Los Angeles since 1977. Thrown from sleep by a loud explosion inside her body, Benny at first thought somebody had hit her. No one else was awake. The 12-year-old's discomfort grew as more internal sensation followed. She felt rapid bursts of energy within, and a bright light flashed through her mental space. Even now she recalls vividly how loud the explosion was. To her at the time it was a mystery, and remained that way until she was told many years later that the startling and uncomfortable impressions she felt that night were caused by the opening of one of her chakras. Chakras, as explained to her, are psychic centers in the body through which spiritual energy flows. The rest of her chakras opened when she was 29 years old, while giving birth to her son Teddy. Soon after, she began hearing voices and psychically seeing into the thoughts, emotions, and intentions of others in an intensified way. With her 5 sisters and brothers, Benny was placed in a Cincinnati orphanage by her parents, who were unable to support them. She regards the move as predestination. She had to be sent away, since growing up under her mother's direction would have hindered her spiritually. At the orphanage, Benny was popular with the staff. To amuse themselves, they had her assess the age and weight of visitors. The accuracy of the 7-year-old astounded them, but they treated her performance as a game. None of them ever recognized that the girl had a gift. Born in Ohio, Benny Holloway moved to California in 1962, where she is a psychic counselor. She tells of her spiritual purpose here on Earth to help usher in the golden age of spirit on the planet. Beatrice had a peculiar gift. When someone was going to die, she felt pushed away from that person. She would know, regardless of what was tried, that person could no longer be helped and would die. Her abilities came when she was 11 years old. She closed her eyes and saw images, and from these she predicted. Those events of the future she perceived happened as she described them, she states. After her mother died, Beatrice was raised from age 9 by a relative. Although other children were aggravated by her strange knowing and mannerisms, calling her names and shunning her, and although she was called crazy by her aunt who didn't understand her gifts, older relatives and neighbors accepted the girl. Feeling sustained, Beatrice hung around them. sharing the benefits of her special awareness. A native of Charleston, South Carolina, Beatrice Washington still resides there. Trained through revelations from God, her spiritual work is done primarily through prayer. She is a healer and a prophet. Wilda grasped the woman's shirt tail, steadying herself. The adult was often an assuring support for the toddler to lean against. When she was older, Wilda saw the familiar figure once again in the family photo album. She was amazed to learn the woman was her maternal grandmother, who had died 4 years before her birth. From her bed, many times, she watched small animated shapes of energy advance menacingly toward her, but they never could pass through the circle of light surrounding her bed. Unintimidated by their presence, she felt pity for these discarnate beings and an urge to change them through love. Habitually during childhood, an angel visited her. Protecting Wilda seemed the cherub's duty. The time Wilda's clothing was aflame after playing with fire, the angel appeared. The 4-year-old was unharmed, although her clothing burned away to nothing. A middle child with 4 sisters and 5 brothers, Wilda enjoyed her siblings' companionship. She and one of her brothers were in the same grade at school. One day, while they were in class, Wilda looked at him. She sensed a distancing between him and everybody else, a fading quality about him as if he were less present. On a family outing that same year, she noticed a halo-shaped light above her brother's head. Again, he seemed strangely far away. This brother died by drowning 2 weeks later. After his death, he appeared to Wilda when she was intensely grieving over him. He patted her to soothe her grief, and she felt the warmth of his hand. Within a few weeks, he came to 13-year-old Wilda again. As they walked, he told her he was all right. He had comprehended he was eternal. Then Wilda perceived they were in a non-physical plane, walking across the sky together. After this meeting, her sadness lessened. She felt relief in her recognition soon afterwards that her brother left this dimension of his own free will. Born in Arkansas, Wilda Mays is a resident of the San Francisco Bay Area. As a young slave, George had no means to get the pocket knife he craved. He prayed, prayer after prayer, that such a knife might be his. In what he called his first revelation, George Washington Carver had a dream. The next morning, the 6-year-old boy excitedly rushed through the plantation fields in a knowing search. It was not long before he found what he was seeking, a watermelon from which protruded the type of knife for which he prayed. This scene of the watermelon with the pocket knife stuck into it was the exact vision he had perceived in his dream the night before. Carver considered that particular experience as being the earliest in the course of events which continued throughout his life. The commonality of these events was that desired knowledge, conditions, and objects came into existence in the physical universe as the result of his prayers. That he had a high psychic sensitivity to the life energies of plants was quite evident by his middle school years. So confident and intuitively knowledgeable about botany was the frail and usually shy boy that he would advise adults with unhesitating authority on correct treatment for their ailing flora. The residents of the southwestern Missouri community of Diamond, where George spent his early years, accepted his natural wisdom. His own recalling of his faculty in childhood is noted in George Washington Carver, in his own words, by Gary R. Krimmer. And many are the tears I have shed, because I would break the roots or flower off some of my pets while removing them from the ground. And strange to say, All sorts of vegetation succeed to thrive under my touch until I was styled the plant doctor, and plants from all over the country would be brought to me for treatment. At this time, I had never heard of botany and could scarcely read. Although George enjoyed being with other children, he was withdrawn around them. He was liveliest, ministering to and playing with the life that generated from earth itself. His brother Jim, in watching George gently tending roses, once asked him what he was doing. The boy's reply was that he was loving the flowers. Before she was 9 years old, for several years, Elizabeth was totally blind. The lack of physical sight was partly offset by the emergence from within her of a new source of information. This information, she describes, consisted of pictures, but never a voice. She used these prophetic visions as they came. As a child, I would sit on the sidewalk, and as people came along, they would stop, and I would tell them what would happen that day. Memphis born and raised, Elizabeth Tolles was 3 months old when her mother died of childbirth complications. The infant's care was taken over by an aunt, and later in childhood by a stepmother. As a high school student, she felt her teachers were quite inadequate, dumb. Elizabeth would read the first page of her book assignment and then make up the rest, and they never detected this. From her made-up material, she wrote reports and received A's. Other students, however, didn't fare as well when they, on their own, used the making-up technique, which she shared with them. They received F's. As exam days approached, without probing, Elizabeth spontaneously knew the details of the tests. Although she did not comprehend the true significance of what she was doing, Elizabeth remembers she consciously used these gifts all during the years of growing up. Elizabeth did not realize at the time that her gift enabled her to know a book's content after reading the first page. There's my green animal. Now that animal, he's in the Garden of Eden. God has him there, but hasn't put him on earth so man can see them, explained elderly artist Minnie Evans of a green creature in one of her paintings. Green is God's theme color. He showed me that animal. I wasn't old enough to go to school. He was on that ring around the moon. There were 3 of them, one real large and a medium size and a small. And I was playing out in the street, and the moon was back up there shining, and it drew my attention. Children said, "Minnie, what are you looking at?" I said, "I'm looking at those elephants." And they came and looked up too and said, "We don't see no elephants." I thought everybody could see them. One of the little children jumped up and hollered and fell down and laughed, said, "Minnie's crazy. She sees elephants going around the moon." But they was going around that circle. I haven't seen another circle as bright as that in all my life. It was just as bright as the moon. On hearing the other children laughing at her daughter, Minnie's mother summoned her home. "Let that child alone. Leave her alone," said a neighbor, interrupting the mother's reprimanding. "God has showed her something he hasn't showed to you, or me, or nobody else." In the documentary film of the painter's life, produced by Ali Light and Irving Saraf, the artist declared that dreams never let her rest much from childhood on. She was almost always tired in the morning. At 13, came another series of dreams. It was old men startled me. They wouldn't try to hurt me, but they would throw me up. There was 5 or 6 of them dressed up like the old prophets. They would catch me. As soon as I dozed off to sleep, they would take me, carry me down the street, push me down, some catch me, keep me from hitting the ground, throw me up, just laughing and going on, till I was just tormented. But they wouldn't try to hurt me. For 3 different times they had me down to the soldiers' cemetery. I have woke up more times in that cemetery. Someone called Minnie's name all day long whenever she stayed at her grandmother's house across the street from a cemetery. I said, "Listen, somebody's calling me." And every time my grandmother said, "Don't answer, don't answer." She was afraid. She'd say, "You fixin' to go to the boneyards," the cemetery, she would call it. She'd say, "If you hear them calling, don't answer. Just come and say, 'Mama, did you call me?'" I had to break myself off from answering, 'cause they called me so much. Oh, what a miserable life I had to be a child. I wasn't nothing but a child. Born in North Carolina in 1883, Minnie Evans began painting and drawing in 1935. The animals going around the moon, which she saw in that childhood vision, are among the subjects of her artworks. I was between 12 and 13. Between 13 and 14, I saw the very first airplane. I didn't know what it was. I was in such an awful fix. So much of dream. I dreamt those great big... I didn't know what to call them. I called on my mother. "There's some big white iron birds flying over our heads." She said, "What kind of crazy thing is that?" I didn't know. Big iron birds, and they're making a lot of funny sound flying over me. But they were flying over and dropping fire. I was running along with the people. The street was full of people, and they was howling and screaming, talking about this war. Since her mother didn't understand, Minnie went to her grandmother about the dream. I said, "Mama, what is it? What kind of thing is that?" She said, "Minnie, something or other God has for you." Later in the new century, when airplanes were invented and came into wide use in warfare, Minnie then recognized what kind of thing she had foreseen in her prophetic dream. In a revelation when she was 12, she was shown her gifts by the Lord. Whether awake or asleep, she would have visions. Spirits would come to talk with her. She would sense and know the dispositions and thoughts of other people and absorb their pains. She would receive empowerment to heal through prayer. Ionia admits she felt unready to be entrusted with her gifts. As one of 12 children being raised by a widowed father, too much of her was needed in the physical world living. Then, on an afternoon when she was quieter than usual, the Lord began to prepare her. Ionia tells that he gave her immediate understanding of the Bible, and when her father perceived her sharp comprehension, he assigned her to read the Bible to him every Sunday. In adulthood, she accepted her gifts. They are as she was shown in the revelation. She uses them to counsel and to be of service in her community. A member of the Praise the Lord Foundation, she visits prisons where she lectures and teaches. She prays with the inmates and instructs them in the scriptures. Born in Louisiana, Ionia White has lived in Richmond, California for almost 3 decades. I remember the first time I turned Queen of the Morning at Disneyland. The first time. I wanted to be the queen, and they came over. It was like I made them, had them do it, because they just came over and made me go up there. I wanted to go, and they picked me. Then I did it another time, confessed April King in 1985. I had a dream about a queen that pulled a sword out of a stone, and that was with Merlin. That was the night before we went to Disneyland. The next day, I was Queen of the Morning. Her mother has noticed that whenever people with cameras are around, April manages to get her picture taken. Well, it's like, I think that they will do it, and I want them to, and then in a little while they turn the camera around and they do it, explains the little girl. April is accurate a lot of the time. Whenever she has a hunch, I definitely pay attention, remarks her mother, Lori King, who is herself a psychic and hostess of a metaphysical radio program. Even before the child was 2 years old, her mother was led to act on the young one's precognitions. For Lori, a particular incident of that period stands out. The family was then living in San Francisco, and Lori was still married to April's father. April kept going to our front door and banging on it and saying, "Mama, go see Granddad. Get car, go now." I called my husband at work and told him that we were driving to Bakersfield. We got there, and within 3 days, my father was in the hospital for bypass surgery. I felt if I hadn't been there to help him get to the hospital, he might not have made it. April was really in touch with him, even though she didn't know him well at that point. Since she was 3 months old, April has been reading cards. At 13 months, she acquired her first deck of regular playing cards for her own independent readings. Her technique was to examine the deck, pass her hands over each card, then select 1 or 2 cards and point them towards a person in the room. She has read at psychic fairs with her mother. Through her accuracy, she has gained her own small following. A crystal marble is a part of her readings. When she looks in it, she sees pictures. Described by her mother as an open child, April has been especially vulnerable to influences of negative spirit entities. The period between ages 3 and 4 was a critical time for her. To handle the psychic turmoil which threatened to encompass April, Laurie took her to a spiritual teacher. They would have sessions with the teacher, Mishananda, and at other times he would appear in spirit to help April handle the entities harassing her. April's great-grandmother, a discarnate being, has been vigilantly present in her life. She appeared during the child's birth and shows up on occasion very visibly, manifesting as she appeared in life, a short, dark-complexioned woman of pure African lineage. She consistently is present when April is sick, and gives Laurie instructions and fusses at her about the care of the child. Aware of her paternal great-grandmother, April talks with her in dreams. At times, they astral travel together. One time, my mother was sick in the afternoon. I touched her, and she felt better for a little while. The next day, I touched her, and she was completely fine. By touching, April has helped her mother and several animals feel better. Participating in a psychic fair at 6 years old, April sold aura drawings she created, her mother reports. Born in May 1980, April King lives with her mother in Bakersfield, California, where she attends a Quaker school. In response to a question about what she thought she was here to do in her life, April replied, "To be a doctor and to help people get well." She also thought of becoming an actress or a practicing psychic. The mother-daughter relationship between Laurie and April is older than the present lifetime. Once the child asked the mother, "Who is the mother and who is the daughter this time?"